All right, thank you for starting this video. So now we want to talk about mentoring, some techniques, and kind of what to expect when you're coming to our program. So first, just think to yourself, maybe write down some answers to these questions. Think about somebody who's been a mentor to you, or maybe there's multiple people. How did you know these people? In what like were they a teacher from school? Were they an athletics coach or a music teacher, or maybe somebody from a religious community that you're a part of? So think about write that down. How did you know this person? And then think about how that mentor helped you. So I'll give you like a minute or so to just kind of think. You can pause the video if you need more time, but think about, where that person, think about how you knew that person and how they helped you. And so when you're thinking about, how have they helped you, there's many different ways, and this is an important piece in thinking about how you're going to be a mentor to these students. So maybe you had teachers who helped you with your homework, or your preparedness to go to college. Maybe you had a family member who helped you get through a difficult time emotionally. Um, there's many different ways that mentors can come into our lives, and so it's important to think about those, the many different aspects of being a mentor. So finally, what did you value about that person's mentorship? So maybe it was just the attention that they gave you, making you feel validated and recognized. Maybe you felt the value in, like career readiness. Maybe you felt value in emotional healing, or in creative expression, or just getting some energy out. There's many different ways that a mentor can be valuable. So write some of that stuff down for yourself. And go ahead and pause this if you want to take more time. I'm going to move on now to the next slide. How do we apply these ideas at After School Club? So mentoring in our program is determined as building relationships. The most important and valuable aspect of this program are the relationships that you build with our students. So consistency is key to those relationships. When mentors keep showing up, they build the trust, and the students are more willing to open up and share about issues that they really want to talk about, but that maybe they're intimidated by. So of course we ask you to be there 3 times a month, and so that's where consistency is key. But coming more than 3 times a month is even better. That really will deepen the relationship and move it beyond something that's just simply helping them do homework, but something where you're a friend who they look forward to seeing to, and they really want to learn from you. So sometimes you'll only be talking about homework because there's so much to do that day with their assignment, and that's okay. We certainly understand that you want to build relationships, and that's an important piece of this. But sometimes building relationships is less about learning who they are or their personality, and can be more about doing what's at hand, the task at hand, to help them move on to whatever they want to do later. And so doing the homework will ingrain your relationship with them more deeply by you're becoming somebody who's a helper. You're succeeding together, and that success will then be associated with you, and they'll have a positive reaction to seeing you in the future. And then of course being there for students during the homework and curriculum time will lead to more in-depth conversations, like I was just saying. So doing the boring stuff that we require the students to do, by doing that you can then move on to more interesting conversations maybe, or some stuff that's more fun. So getting through that more difficult space is what then makes it worthwhile to do the conversation afterwards, which can be more enjoyable. So what can get in the way of your mentoring relationship? So getting out of your comfort zone is probably the hardest part. I mean, and even I experienced this having known many of the students for 2 or 3 or 4 years. I still feel a little bit unsure about whether or not they want me there, but you just have to go in. They do want us there. They really value the mentor relationships that they get from this program, and so take the initiative, maybe find a student who's on their own to go and sit with, or if you really just are intimidated from doing that, ask the program staff to introduce you to the students. Typically, we're really focused on many different things, and so we don't necessarily think about this piece. We really want you to try to take the initiative on your own, but we certainly are, of course, happy to help you, because that first part is the first time you meet them is the most difficult, and then after that, you'll become more comfortable, and maybe you develop a really good relationship with one student the first week, and then the next week you want to develop a relationship with another, and so you can use that first student to ask them to introduce you to their friends so that you can get to know them as well. Communication will be something else that gets in the way. Obviously, most of our students are still learning English, especially reading and writing, and so even their speaking is still in development, and so speaking at a slower rate, kind of like maybe how I'm speaking now, but even more intentional. So that's being intentional, not being insultingly slow. You want to be concise and clear with what you're saying when you pronounce, and you always want to avoid idioms. So I mean, it's, you don't want to say like, oh, we can kill two birds with one stone here, or something like that. That's something that might get confusing to the student. Certainly, there might be a time that we do an idiom activity because that's a part of speech and culture, but it might get confusing in what you're doing now. Using active listening skills is really important. Clarifying what you heard by asking the student to repeat it instead of asking the student a yes or no question is really important, because they'll probably just say yes out of fear of looking like they don't know what's happening. I mean, I'll do that myself just from insecurity maybe, and that's something we don't want to let the students move on without the knowledge that we hope that they have. And so letting them know that it's okay to ask questions and it's okay to repeat stuff is also important. And always giving them time to process is key to having a good mentoring relationship, especially with an English learner. So addressing deeper issues can be challenging. Sometimes you'll have that deep relationship, and then all of a sudden a student might bring up something about the financial situation at home, or maybe about their family member overseas who still is in the war zone, or some of their own emotional distresses that they're experiencing here in America. We encourage you to use effective language that assigns value to what they're feeling and recognizes them as valid feelings. We also know that you're not a professional mental health person, nor are we, but our staff have more connections and resources than you do as an individual mentor. So you can always go to the program staff as a first line of support. In the moment, maybe they can help you resolve it, and then if it's a larger issue, then the program staff can then make a referral to a place like ARYSE at JFCS, where the program will then connect the student to, maybe it's their family needs welfare, or they need an appointment with a counselor, or they need an immigration lawyer. All of that stuff can be happening through the ARYSE program, and so you can be that first line of defense where you then pass the concern onto the program staff, who then forward that to the ARYSE program. So now we're going to transition to talking about restorative practices, which is a method of conflict resolution that we use. It is based in restorative justice. It's something that can be used in the justice system, but also in the school setting and our after-school program as well. And so the idea of restorative practices is to build healthy relationships and come to resolutions that allow the victim and the perpetrator to feel recognized and validated, instead of using punitive action to make the perpetrator feel a certain way. We want to make sure that there's full understanding on both sides, and so using restorative practices can make that happen. So restorative practices kind of happens on an informal to formal continuum. You have on the left here, you have effective statements, which I kind of mentioned before. Effective statements are very simple, but they can be difficult to implement because you're so used to more typical language. And restorative questions are actually going to be put on cards for you, and you'll actually be able to receive those from the program director. So always ask him if you want those restorative questions. On the right side of that continuum, then you have more formal settings for restorative practices like circles and restorative conferences, where we can either proactively or reactively resolve issues. So here's some examples of effective statements. On the left, we have a typical statement such as, "Stop teasing Andrew." On the right side, we have an effective statement, which is more preferenced for our program. Instead of saying stop teasing Andrew, you can say it makes me upset when I hear you teasing Andrew, because then that is giving an emotional weight to the statement that you're providing, and it's also assigning an emotional weight to the actions of the student who's doing that teasing. You also, another example is, you shouldn't do that. But you can also say, I'm frustrated that you aren't listening to me, because again, you're assigning an emotion that is tied to the student's actions. And building that connection is what we're trying to do here with the effective statements. And so, of course, this is really important with our K-8 students. It's still important with some high school students. I mean, certainly the freshmen and sophomores are still maturing, but even the older kids might still, they're very comfortable. They might just kind of be in their comfort zone and revert back to, more immature actions. And so we just have to remind them through effective statements of the behavior that we're trying to mold and see with them at our program. Here's the examples of the effective questions, and again, these will be on cards that are available to you at the program. And so the top half are questions to respond to challenging behavior. So that's something where the perpetrator or the person who is the bully maybe in that situation is the perpetrator, and so you're asking them these questions. And then you want to ask the victim who is harmed by that person's actions the questions at the bottom half. So here's a theoretical approach to social discipline at restorative practices. On the y-axis on the left here, you have control, which is like setting limits or providing discipline, and then on the x-axis at the bottom here, you have support, which is providing encouragement and growth in the students. So we are aiming to have high amounts of control and high amounts of support, which is then in this box up here, the restorative box. An example of a high control with low support is providing a punishment to the student while not encouraging them that they can improve after that. Just kind of saying like, oh, you're a bad kid and you need to improve yourself. That can be an example of high control without much support at all. A high amount of support with low amount of control would be permissive. So if a student is doing something that is unacceptable, kind of coming down on them too easy, not being, providing too much support while not helping them recognize that they still need to improve their behavior for the future. So that would be something like saying, oh, that's okay, like everybody does that once in a while, instead of saying, oh yeah, everybody does that once in a while, but next time let's try to do this. So we want to try to give them that, the next steps, which is the control and limit setting in that instance. So of course we want to try to set that high level of control with high level of support, meaning that the kids are feeling supported and valued while also understanding what is expected of them. Circles are a way that we can achieve this. So this is on the formal side of the curriculum for restorative practices. So we want to use these proactively to build community. So we can use like these as daily check-ins, but also then we use these reactively when there's a conflict and we want to resolve it. So instead of expelling a student from the program or suspending them, we want to provide them with a restorative conference in order to address the issue that they're having. So circles have these basic rules, and it's important that you and the program staff will be the ones who enforce these rules. So one voice while somebody is talking, nobody else should be talking. Respecting the response, meaning you're not laughing at others or saying like, oh no, that's wrong when somebody makes an opinionated statement, allowing them to have that response. Keeping everything in the group as confidential, and then speaking for yourself instead of speaking for others. So that's the basics of circles, and that concludes this section of the video. So thank you for watching.